Hey guys, Argent here with a reactionary review of Spectre. So I just got back from the movie. I just watched it an hour or two ago. So this is my review of it, my reactionary review, if you will. So I'll see how long this goes. I'm gonna warn you, this will probably be a long one. I have a lot to say about this. Some of this I should probably rewatch or re-familiarize myself with the other Daniel Craig ones. This one I think actually makes the other ones better because we actually get something we haven't seen before in the Bond franchise. We get a kind of a conclusion for the character, and Bond finally kind of gets the happy ending he's earned after decades of service to his country, and he gets it with, in my opinion, the most beautiful Bond girl I've ever seen. Now I normally don't do this for these, but let's take a look at the Bond girl for a moment because she kind of makes the movie for me. Maybe it makes me shallow, maybe it makes me a sexist pig, which is probably a compliment given my political views. But she is Leia Seydoux. I think she's absolutely fantastically beautiful. She has, in my mind, pretty much almost the perfect figure. She has beautiful face, gorgeous eyes. Let me see, where's that picture of her wearing that nice fitting dress? Yes, here we go. I mean, look at her. She's absolutely gorgeous, has nearly a perfect figure, etc. So why do I bring that up? Because I'm a heterosexual male and I like to look at attractive women. And if the female lead in your film is an eye-poppingly beautiful French actress who's, despite some of her other things, is rather feminine, that makes the movie a lot better for me. Particularly, this is a Bond movie. That's why I'm talking about it. You go to see a Bond movie for a couple things. You go for the story, yeah, but a lot of it is about the action and about the girls. So I just like to get that out of the way. So let's actually talk about the movie now. I also discuss her and her beauty because of the plot. So we're going to get into the plot now. We're going to talk a bit about the movie. We'll see how long this goes on for. But yeah, spoiler alert, obviously. So Spectre opens in Mexico, and I'll just discuss as we go along. Attempting an assassination on an assassination on a man connected to the mysterious Spectre organization. Now we don't know it's called Spectre yet, but for those of us who know anything about Bond whatsoever and saw the title of the movie and saw the ring he's wearing, it's obvious that he's a member of Spectre. So we get a good opening action sequence involving a fight on a helicopter. Just a bit about the opening scene. It almost makes me want to go to Mexico. It's like it's Day of the Dead there, and we get a bunch of people in skeleton masks and stuff. Now, something I'll be trying to point out in this movie as we go through is this movie is kind of it almost feels like a conclusion to the Bond franchise. And if the franchise was going to stop here, this would be a good place to stop. Obviously, they're probably going to reboot it again. I don't mind this as much as other reboots because that's kind of how the Bond franchise is. It's serial. Each Bond is kind of different, basically a different character entirely. So I kind of feel like if Daniel Craig's Bond gets a happy ending, that doesn't preclude another Bond having an unhappy ending, and that doesn't undo what happened with his Bond. So we have the Day of the Dead celebration in Mexico, and this is very much reminiscent of kind of what was Mardi Gras and the kind of stuff that was happening in Live and Let Die. Because Live and Let Die had all the voodoo stuff, had all the skeleton stuff, had all the parties and dancing in the southern United States, and this is very clearly an homage to that. So Bond succeeds in tracking down the guy who he's supposed to kill. Now what's interesting is he starts out with a girl. Now something I find interesting about this James Bond, the Daniel Craig one, is he's much less of a hedonist. I actually find, aside from his alcohol addiction, he really isn't. If you look at it, almost all the women that he sleeps with in these movies are part of his job. He doesn't really seem to be as much of a lover. He doesn't really seem to really enjoy sleeping with them. I mean, you had, I think the other Bonds were just much more of ladies' men, and they were much more kind of interested in just kind of promiscuous sex. I think Daniel Craig's Bond feels a lot more sensitive, a lot more kind of looking for that special someone. The only female before Madeline that he ever expressed any kind of affection for was Vespa, and with her death, I just find whenever he's sleeping with a woman, it's just very cold, calculating. Like he studied how to seduce women, but it's just part of the job. Whereas the other Bonds I found more mixed business and pleasure. Because at the beginning he's with a girl and he just kind of abandons her and he doesn't really care, and she's decently attractive. So he's in Mexico on orders from the previous M. Judi Dench's M was killed in the previous movie Skyfall, and she left a videotape with a last request to him. And the request was to go and kill some guy in Mexico, some Italian guy in Mexico, and investigate him. So Bond kills him, and he takes the Spectre ring off of him and goes to investigate it further. So Bond goes to the funeral of his widow. Apparently in M's message, they had left behind a hint for Bond. M had said, kill this guy, go to his funeral, talk to his widow. This man is high up in whatever Spectre is. If we kill him, we can flush the rest of them out. Which is a good plan. So he goes there, and we have Monica Bellucci, who I have to admit, for a woman her age, she looks very good. You can see why she has been such kind of a dominant, kind of sexy female character for so long. I remember in Prince of Persia Warrior Within, they had a character based on Monica Bellucci, Kalina the Empress of Time, and she was absolutely stunning. So while you can see her age, she's a still very attractive woman. So Bond meets up with her and he saves her from being assassinated. She was the wife of the guy he killed, and now that the guy he killed is dead, her protection's gone, and Spectre has decided to kill her off, so that she may become a so that whatever she knows will be buried with her. So Bond saves her. He seduces her and gets information out of her. Once again, it's very cold and clinical. He just questions her when they're sleeping together, and he just leaves. He does arrange for her to be picked up by Felix, who is sir not appearing in this film. So she will presumably be put in witness protection by the CIA and be safe, which is nice. Bond does have a moral compass. It's kind of complicated. It kind of has to be given his position. But I think he does in general try not to hurt innocent people. So he finds out from Monica Bellucci that the funeral is over, and because they're all in Italy to go to the funeral, they are having a Spectre meeting. So they go to the Spectre meeting. So Bond goes to the Spectre meeting and sneaks in and witnesses the people talking about their control of the world. Now, what's been going on back in London is the 00 program is getting shut down and being replaced with 9i. Is it 9i or 8i? Let me just double check this in my notes. Yes, 9i's, which will combine all the surveillance footage from 9 of the largest countries in the world into a central database in Britain that will enable all the world's intelligence agencies to see everything. It turns out that this is actually being done by Spectre. The building itself and the system was designed and given to them by a private consortium, which is Spectre, and was paid for. So stupidly, the various governments of the world thought this was a good idea. The only government that was against it was South Africa, but Spectre soon kills off the minister who was against it, and the new one, fearing further terrorist attacks, decides to give them to give in and to do it. So M is having a power struggle with C, who is the kind of the new Minister of Security or Minister of Intelligence or whatever. Now I should point out another homage. when Monica Bellucci's kind of going through her house, it kind of reminds me, kind of the whole villa atmosphere and the whole fountain thing, and the people walking up behind her really remind me of the opening scene of From Russia with Love. We'll see. There's a lot of these scenes as we go through. So they're making Nine Eyes. It turns out Spectre is behind it, so they will have all the information and be able to control the world. He witnesses a meeting of them. There's a woman who looks a bit like Kleb, if you remember her from the old ones. Um, the guy who's apparently Blofeld enters, and we can't see his face because of the darkness, which is an homage to the earlier Blofelds, in particular the Donald Pleasant one, where you never saw his face, and it was always kind of obscured or in the darkness or something. And he's played by Max Weber, I think his name is, who does, Christopher Waltz, who does a absolutely horrible job in this movie. The villain is the worst part of the movie. We have this kind of creep. In my opinion, that Christopher Waltz is grossly miscast. Not only that, he plays the same character in every movie, and it's getting really annoying. Yeah, we get it. People liked him in Inglourious Bastards. He did a good scene. Does that mean we're going to have to put up with him playing the villain in every movie for the next couple decades? He's not that good an actor. Anyways, so we are treated kind of a strange scene where it's kind of like one of the old James Bond movies where there's kind of Spectre sitting around a table and they're negotiating and they're kind of talking about the business, and he comes in all obscured in shadow, and then he references the fact that James Bond is there, and we have a kind of a classic Bond car chase. We got some stuff. We have like I'm trying to remember what it is. They have a flamethrower. There's like an ejector seat in the car. Q had given him an explosive watch, but overall it's kind of limited. The gadgets in this movie, which is kind of one of my few complaints. Actually, I have a couple complaints. I guess I just liked a lot of the rest of the movie, so the movie's glaring flaws didn't really seem that big. So they discover that they refer to someone called the Pale King. The Pale King is Mr. White, who was a villain in the absolutely wretched movie Quantum of Solace, or as I like to call it, a quantum of shit. Quantum of Solace is the worst James Bond movie next to Octopussy, in my opinion. It was absolutely horrific. So they have to go and find Mr. White, who's dying of thallium poisoning, which is I think what the Russians used to kill people. It's like a lethal radiation dosage. So he goes to Austria, and because Quantum has said that, Spectre has said they're going to kill Bond. Not Bond. Spectre's going to go kill Mr. White because he knows too much. And they can't wait for him to die naturally because he might, by the time he finally dies, decide to tell what he knows. Or try to blackmail Spectre. So he goes and he has an interesting conversation with Mr. White, who's dying of cancer. Mr. White more or less makes a deal with him to save his daughter, Madeleine, who's the woman I said was really hot earlier. So he tells Bond that she's a doctor who's working somewhere in Austria, and that Bond has to go and save her. And the deal is more or less that she can lead him to an American, which winds up being a hotel in Morocco, where Mr. White has all his dirt on Spectre hidden. So basically, the deal is that Bond will go and save the girl, and then she'll lead him to the intelligence that he needs. So it's kind of this is kind of like classic Bond. He has to go save a girl, save the world, etc. We don't have any more of these like lame like diamond plots or like North Koreans or anything. We have an evil organization that wants to dominate the world. We have a beautiful woman who Bond needs to save. We got a father's dying request, and there's kind of a touching scene where he gives Mr. White his gun and says, "This is my word. If you want to shoot me and kill me, you can do that here." And that gets Mr. White to believe him, and Mr. White shoots himself after making the deal. because he's in such pain dying of terminal cancer. So Bond goes to meet with Dr. Madeline Swan. And it's kind of funny because he goes in to meet with her, and it's kind of at a medical clinic, which is kind of a reference to on Her Majesty's Secret Service. It's kind of like it's a medical clinic up in the mountains for like fancy smancy people to go and rest and recuperate. And this is very much kind of in line with what it was happening on Her Majesty's Secret Service, where they went to the mountain retreat, and the idea was they were going to spread mad cow disease. So it's very reminiscent of that. So we kind of have their first meeting scene, and she reveals that she's tough. Now, it's interesting with Madeline. She's not really a feminist. She is kind of, to some extent, what would be called a strong, independent woman. But she's not really a feminist, and she's not really opposed to the idea of having a relationship. She's kind of opposed to the idea of having a relationship with Bond at first. But that's largely just because Bond kills people for a living. So they have kind of an interesting conversation, and it turns out that Bond has been followed by Spectre to the hospital. Q also shows up, and Bond passes off the Spectre ring that he took in the opening sequence and tells him to look into it. Q discovers, of course, that all the former members of all the former villains that Bond fought, and indeed the entire Quantum organization, was just an arm of Spectre. So that's kind of an interesting thing to know. It kind of wraps all the previous movies together. I'm glad that they abandoned Quantum as being separate. So I always thought Quantum was really kind of lame. Like, we had no idea what it was. We had no idea what its goals were. The movie that was named after it didn't really explain shit about the nature of Quantum and its role in the franchise. So as Madeline is being taken away, Bond chases after them in an airplane, and we get one of the franchise's most over-the-top action scenes, where Bond succeeds in taking out 3 armored cars with his airplane, which includes scenes where the plane's wings break off, and he repeatedly rams the cars with said plane. It's completely over the top and completely just kind of awesome. It kind of reminds you of something from maybe the Pierce Brosnan era. It kind of reminds me of a lot of scenes. It kind of reminds me of the opening to Die Another Day. It reminds you of like some of the classic Bond movies. I forget which one it is. I think it's The World Is Not Enough, where they have like the chase scene on the snowmobiles going down the hill. It also kind of reminds me a bit of the ending, the big ultimate action scene in License to Kill. So he saves her, and she demands that she goes with Bond if they're going to an American, etc. So they head to Morocco, and on the train to there, they have kind of a conversation, and sorry, the train's not quite yet. They go to Morocco, and they discover an American is a hotel where Mr. White would stay every year along with his wife and daughter, and when they got divorced he would still go there every year, probably to update kind of his Spectre blackmail. We kind of have an emotional scene, and Madeline rejects Bond, and Bond gets kind of depressed and drinks himself into a stupor. They eventually manage to find in the hotel room that there is a secret wall behind it which contains all the intelligence that he had gathered about Spectre over time when he was working for the organization, in case something like this were to come up and he'd have to attempt to blackmail them or otherwise protect his daughter. We discover some pictures, that he has all kinds of pictures of his daughter and videotapes of her like walking and stuff, showing that whatever his many flaws were, Mr. White did love his daughter. And actually the reason Spectre decided to kill him was because he objected to the murder of random innocent people, including women and children. He may have been a bad man, he may have been an assassin, he may have been willing to topple governments, but he had a personal code of ethics that as much as possible, the general death and destruction of the Shadow World should be kept within it and not kind of imposed on the wider society. So Madeline demands to go with him, and Bond eventually relents. on the train, we find out that Madeline is completely capable of using a gun. She just doesn't like to use them because of her father. I find it interesting, despite the fact that she is kind of a strong female character, I don't really get a feminist vibe off of her. While she is kind of resistant to Bond's advances, it more comes from the fact that she sees him as a womanizer correctly and sees him as kind of some kind of a guy who kills people for a living. And she's kind of hesitant. Like, she's kind of attracted to it, but at the same time, she views him as being dangerous. So she doesn't really reject him because she's like bitchy and doesn't want men to show interest in her. She's just understandably upset about the death of her father. Bond may have killed her father for all she knows, etc. But yeah, she always does dress in rather feminine clothes and has very feminine mannerisms. On the train we're treated to a scene where she wears the dress from this. Absolutely stunning. She has a great figure. As I said, I just like looking at attractive women. So sue me. So they're eating dinner together. They talk. They're getting to know one another. She's a doctor, if I didn't mention before. That's why they were at the clinic. So beautiful and intelligent, and I think she has a nice personality too. She is rather sweet. She's just kind of pissed off at Bond for ruining her life, for coming in and basically telling her that he kills people for a living, etc. I think she can be forgiven for being a bit tied up over that. So yeah, they have dinner, then the table gets flipped over, and we kind of have a henchman in this movie. We have, let's see, what's his name again? One second. Mr. Hinks, who's kind of an homage to Jaws, because he keeps almost dying, and he's basically just kind of invincible. So Bond has a big fight scene with him, and Madeline helps out too. And Daniel Craig's about to get thrown out of the train when Madeline shoots him, and then Bond wraps a chain around his neck and that's attached to a barrel and throws him out of the train. However, he doesn't die, as we later discover. The train takes them to a... After this, Madeline realizes that she's fallen in love with Bond. And they, in a passion fueled only by fighting to your death against crazy 7-foot-tall hitmen do, they make sweet monkey love. It's rather a cute scene, actually. Somehow or whatever, they've kind of fallen in love. Madeline, I think, just kind of views Bond as basically kind of an honorable good guy, whatever his flaws are. She's kind of, I think there probably is some daddy thing. She kind of sees him as the world that she thought she had left behind, but he's kind of a better version about it because he does have a sense of honor and duty and kind of a moral compass, even if he is kind of rough around the edges. So I think she likes that, and it's just, you know what? It's Daniel Craig. I mean, just look at him. The guy's alpha as fuck. He just beats the shit out of people. He's like this really strongly built guy. He's very charming. Kind of has that detached thing going. I mean, women go crazy for that. So she kind of falls in love with him, which is kind of rapid, but I don't really mind if it's like kind of poorly developed. I just like fluff. I just like when characters fall in love and they're kind of happy together and it's just kind of pleasant. Yeah, so they get off the train at kind of a deserted station and kind of in the middle of nowhere. And then a car comes to pick them up. And it's kind of reminiscent of Dr. No, because it's like this old-style Aston Martin picks them up at this deserted train station in the middle of the desert and takes them back to the compound. And here we kind of get a Dr. No reference because they're taken to kind of like a hotel on the Spectre compound. Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead of myself. Sorry, in Mr. White's room they had found the coordinates for Spectre's home base. I don't know if I really need to say that, but it's kind of hidden out in the middle of the Moroccan desert where no one can find it, which is suspiciously similar to the plot of Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Yeah, so anyways, that happens. So they're taken, and there's kind of a hotel on the Spectre base, and the people act with like very contrived courtesy. They act like they're in an actual hotel. If you remember Dr. No, there's like even a receptionist, they're given room service, they're given nice clothing, and they're told to go meet the villain for dinner. which is a very Bond thing. They always have dinner with the villain. So they go over, and they're led into a room with a meteorite in it. One may wonder what the meteorite has to do with the movie. I don't know. I think the Spectre base is in a meteorite hole. It doesn't make a lot of sense. You think maybe like there's going to be a virus or like some kind of super thing that has to do with the meteorite. But no, it's just there. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. And then Blofeld comes out, played by Christopher Waltz. And he just does an absolutely horrible job. Now, why is his role as Blofeld so bad? Because Blofeld is not a complex character. He's a psychopath who wants power and wealth. And that's fine. Yeah, he was a good villain in the initial ones. He's just kind of evil. He's Dr. Evil. Dr. Evil is literally just based off of Blofeld. There's nothing wrong with just having a villain who's a bad guy. There's nothing, like, the history's full of men, and You Only Live Twice, the book, Bond does like a monologue about how Blofeld is like a man like Napoleon, and his crimes are on a global scale. His ego is so big and his desires are so huge that he commits crimes against nations and not just against people. So that's fine, that's good. The thing is, you have to ham it up a bit. If you're going to have this evil organization like Spectre, and you're going to have this evil kind of head of the organization, you got to ham it up a bit. You got to have some, like, a shtick to it. Like, he has to be kind of wacky. He has to be kind of eccentric. He has to have some charisma or something. I mean, that's kind of like how all Bond villains are. Scaramanga was obsessed with kind of like dueling people, and he kind of acted a bit like a vampire. Goldfinger was obsessed with gold and kind of stuff like that, and was just kind of a goofball. What's his name? Red Grant was just a sociopathic killing machine who was immensely strong and clinical. You had Elliot Carver, who was really kind of cheesy and campy. Then you had Alex Trevelyan, who was kind of motivated by revenge. Blofeld doesn't have anything interesting about him. He's just kind of Blofeld, and we're supposed to kind of like him because he's Blofeld. So it's revealed, and this isn't a joke. This is like, I was expecting M. Night Shyamalan to jump in and go, "What a twist!" But apparently Blofeld is James Bond's stepbrother. Yeah, he's his evil twin brother. Okay, they're not related, but he's his evil twin brother. And apparently, when James Bond's parents died, he was taken in by someone, and that person grew to love him more than his son, and this made Blofeld evil, and he wants to take over the world because he has daddy issues. Which is literally the most lame, pathetic motivation I've ever heard for a villain ever. So not only is Christopher Waltz a terrible fit for... It's just a terrible fit for the role of Blofeld, but his motivation's terrible. Why does he have to like become a psychopath and try and take over the world because his daddy didn't love him enough? I mean, that's like Freudian shit. That's like the laziest writing ever. Why does he have to be Bond's half brother? Why do they have to be related? Why can't he just be some evil psychopath who wants to take over the world? Well, he can't for whatever reason. So he wants to kill Bond. And he's set up the events of the previous 3 movies to make Bond's life harder and more depressing, to pay him back for the fact that Daddy didn't love him. Now this is just really contrived, because that clearly wasn't the case in the first movies. This is clearly a retcon. Like, I can accept it makes sense that Quantum is kind of like a hands-off, kind of like separate organization that Spectre uses to carry out stuff that they don't want people to know about. Like that stuff makes sense to me. It makes sense to me that like the criminal enterprises that happened in the first few films were carried out because of Spectre. That they were Spectre organizations, because Spectre's a global crime syndicate. They have their fingers in everything. But that he was particularly doing it to like hurt James, it doesn't make any sense. So then we kind of have a reference to Goldfinger, where Bond is strapped down into a chair, and Blofeld has a machine that will puncture holes in his brain and slowly kill him in a painful way, dissecting his memories, etc. So all that stuff happens, and he just keeps puncturing James with them, and then he kind of did that, and Bond uses his explosive watch to get out. They managed to blow up the Spectre compound. It's also kind of a reference to The World Is Not Enough, where Bond's kind of trapped in that Turkish torture device that slowly breaks the neck and suffocates you that you're strapped into. So they blow up the compound by shooting something, which is kind of like a reference to the old movies where there is always the auto destruct sequence. So Bond flies away. So they get back to London. And they discover that, yeah, his name's Blofeld, etc. So they make it all the way back to London. M, the chief of staff, Q, and Moneypenny all team up together to try and take down the main villain of the to take down C, who, as we recall, is the head of British intelligence, who is going to activate the machine that will spy on everybody. Kind of sounds like the plot of Furious 7, but I guess all these movies copy each other. So they get back there, and when they're about to go on the final mission, Madeline confesses that she can't get involved with a man like James because he'll always have to put his job first, and they can't be together, and she doesn't want to live her entire life wondering if he's going to get shot on a mission. So James is extremely depressed by this because I think she's like, as Blofeld said, she's the only woman who could understand him because her father was similar. So unlike kind of Vespa, who could never understand him, Madeline is really the only woman he could really be with. Also, she's just really hot. So, like M understood him, but she was kind of an old woman who was already married. So let's see here. So M and the others go to the control center. M makes a really lame speech about democracy, kind of like Obi-Wan Kenobi in Return of the Sith. I believe in Great Britain. I believe in democracy. And then the villain's like, what is democracy? It doesn't matter. The world needs order. And somehow this system will create order by turning over the world to an international crime syndicate led by sociopaths. He tries to justify it. It's not really well done. This whole part of the movie doesn't really make a lot of sense. It kind of feels like they needed a plot device. Why it couldn't just be a nuclear missile, why it had to be this lame surveillance thing, I don't know. So there's kind of a scuffle. Q hacks the computer because they left their ports open. He shuts down the surveillance system. C kind of acts like a dumbass and kind of throws himself, like he accidentally falls out of from the top of the building and dies. They save the day, they shut the thing down. But this movie's not really about the Nine Eyes plan. I mean, no one gives a shit about the surveillance system. It's kind of irrelevant. This movie is, and why it's a good movie, is because it's about the conclusion of Bond's character arc. Now, they thought Blofeld was dead, but Blofeld comes back. I forgot to mention, but they were going to demolish the MI6 headquarters and move everybody to the building built with Spectre money. So MI6 is queued for detonation. So Bond goes all the way down to the basement and finds a Blofeld, now with his distinctive eye scar, sitting in the room with the bulletproof glass that De Silva, or whatever his name was, the villain from the previous movie, from Skyfall, was in. So they have a conversation, and he states that he has 3 minutes. He can either get out or try and save Madeline and die in the process. So Bond decides to save the love of his life and manages to find her on the top floor as he runs through the dilapidated, rundown MI6, which is rather a emotional scene, as this has been so dominant in all the previous Bond movies. This has kind of been the place where Bond. It's just been featured in all of them since the building was built. And to just see it so run down, etc., is kind of a metaphor that we'll get to a bit more once I just get the plot done. So he manages to find her. They jump. They manage to land on a net down below, and they get out on the boat just as the building explodes, which is kind of like an homage to The World Is Not Enough, where Bond escapes MI6 as it's being blown up. So Blofeld is in a helicopter trying to fly away. Bond somehow manages to hit the helicopter's engine box, which explodes, and the helicopter crashes on a bridge. James Bond manages to reach him as M and the others show up. Blofeld has broke his leg and is trying to crawl away. James points a gun at his head, and Blofeld says, "Do it, finish it." More or less trying to prove that Bond is the man that he knows he is, a cold-blooded killer. Bond, however, points out that he is out of bullets and could not kill him, even if he were choose to, and basically ejecting the clip and throwing the gun aside, he walks away. M takes Blofeld into custody to interrogate him. Bond realizes, walks over to Madeline, and decides that he wants to spend the rest of his life with her, probably getting married, hopefully having children. I mean, they're both of such superior genetic material. They're both good looking, have high IQ, etc. Hopefully they'll stay together. So they kiss and walk off. In the epilogue, James goes and gets his old car, the one that had gotten beat up pretty bad in Skyfall, and it's confirmed that he has left the Secret Service and is now going to live out the rest of his life with the woman he loves. So that's Skyfall. So I kind of gave a bit of analysis as we go through, so let's just talk about this a bit more. It's kind of a long, convoluted plot, so I kind of wanted to just get through it, because this is going to run very long, because it's a very long movie. I mean, the movie's 2.5 hours. I can't really summarize it and give like extensive commentary in less than like 45 minutes. So this kind of concludes Bond's character arc. As I said, the Daniel Craig Bond is very different. He's a lot more kind of sensitive, a lot more kind of moral, a lot less kind of into casual sex. As I said, whenever he does have sex, it seems like it's, except with Vespa, it seems like it's just something he does to kind of get ahead. Like, he doesn't sleep with the main girl in Quantum of Solace. Generally speaking, if he sleeps with any girl in this franchise, it's very clear he doesn't enjoy it. He does love Madeline, though. I think that's very clear, because she's the only woman who can kind of understand him. And I think he kind of realizes that his time's over and that he's done his duty. He has been through 4 films. He's been through hell. He's finally taken down the Spectre from his childhood. Ironically, I didn't mean that to be a pun. He's taken down the man that's hounded him every step of the way. He's finally put his specters and demons to rest, and he can finally go off into the sunset with the woman of his dreams. So I'm kind of happy about this. I mean, if they decide to end the Bond franchise here, I'd be kind of disappointed. But it's been a good ride, and I kind of hope that after all the crap Bond's been through, because it's sad, like, because he always meets these beautiful, wonderful women, and then they just disappear, and he never hears from them again. So it's nice that he finally gets to go off with one and kind of find some happiness and some peace. And they can kind of heal together and grow together. And I like Madeline a lot, not just because of her beauty, but she's very supportive of James. She comes to love him unconditionally. She comes to care about him deeply. And I think she kind of has that feminine urge to nurture. I think she'll nurture James. I think she'll love him, as I said, unconditionally, which is really what he needs. He needs someone who will just be there for him, someone who will just love him. So aside from that, which is kind of what I thought was the best part of the movie, was kind of their relationship, even if it wasn't the most logical thing. This movie was deeply reactionary, actually. A constant theme throughout the movie is basically the villain C just yells, current year, current year, current year. He's just like, it's the current year. We can't have an intelligence program anymore. We can't have people shooting the bad guys. We have to have drones. We have to have computers. We have to have mass surveillance. Everybody has to be on. Everybody has to be watched at all times. Everybody has to like basically be just constantly observed. We can't. We have to get rid of the old people. We have to get rid of the old stuff. We have to just get with the current times, basically. And we see kind of a nihilism at the heart of Spectre. They don't have any ideology. They don't have any goals, really. They just want to take over the world. But it's not even out of power. It's just kind of like it's something to do because they're bored. much like the attempt of C to kind of justify his actions is just so half-assed, and just you can see he doesn't even believe it. He doesn't even really believe in the political program that he sold his soul for. It's just very pointless. And M at even one point even says, they're like, they say to M, "You believe in things that don't exist anymore." And M says, "Well, at least I believe in something. You don't believe in anything." And that's kind of a theme of the Bond books and the Bond movies. The Bond books were chronologue the downfall of the British Empire. The first one kind of starts off very optimistic when Britain was still on top of the world, when she still mattered. And we watched the fall of the British Empire through the eyes of Bond, through the eyes of, frankly, Ian Fleming, as he kind of became a bitter old man who watched one of the greatest civilizations ever to exist to collapse into basically just a mess, a weak mess. So by the end of You Only Live Twice and The Man with the Golden Gun, the last two novels, Britain is just a joke. People just make fun of it. People don't take it seriously. Everyone just talks about America or China or Japan. Britain's lost all its overseas colonies. Even the Jamaicans don't take them seriously anymore. So that's kind of what this is like. Britain has fallen even further. And not only that, there's not even really countries anymore. There's kind of this new world order. There's global democracy. There's what use is there to have national spy intelligence? What use is there to fight anymore? The countries that they serve don't even believe in themselves. They embrace diversity. They embrace multiculturalism. They embrace feminism. They reject religion. There's nothing left to really fight for. So if there's nothing to die for, there's nothing to live for either. And that's to some extent kind of a reflection of Daniel Craig, is he doesn't have really anything to live or die for anymore. And he just kind of, wrong button. To rediscover that about himself, a sense of honor, of duty, of kind of traditional masculine aristocratic virtue is really kind of what these movies are about. Bond kind of being deeply scarred and recovering from it. And kind of the idea also that there is this kind of reactionary impulse contained within the individual person. There is this desire to get married and have kind of like a feminine, pretty wife. There is this desire to have honor, to die like a soldier, to live for something, to die for something even. And these movies are kind of just a reflection of just kind of how run down British society is and how run down Western society is. Our complete unwillingness to fight in our own defense. Our complete unwillingness to really do anything in our self-interest. They just kind of represent a society at war with itself that is in terminal decline, but I suppose it offers a bit of hope in that there are still people who always fight for it. And there are still always great men who will arise in the time of crisis and seek to hold back the night, no matter how dark it gets. Perhaps that's true, and perhaps that's not true, but it's an interesting thought, and it's a good end, more or less. Like I'm sure the franchise will go on, because this franchise will always go on. They make too much money. But it's a good end to Daniel Craig's character. It's good for Bond to finally get some peace. I find his Bond a lot more sympathetic and relatable to the other ones. Kind of a lot more sensitive. I thought it was a good movie. I'd recommend seeing it. As I said, there's some massive flaws in the plot. Like him being Blofeld's brother is just fucking bizarre. The actual surveillance system isn't that interesting. It's kind of like a cross between Mission Impossible 5 and Furious 7 that doesn't really do aspects of either one as well, but does some things better. Overall, I give it, an 8 out of 10. I thought it was a good movie. I'd recommend it. This is Argent Templar, signing out.